Today's lesson's over section 7.2, direction fields with Euler's method. So this first problem, let's suppose we are asked to sketch the graph of a solution of the initial value problem y prime equals x plus y and y of 0 equals 1. So for problems like this, they're asking us to plot that point or that initial value, which is 0, 1, and then using the differential equation of x plus y, they want us to be able to kind of sketch what that would look like using basically our slopes. And so the first thing we need to do is kind of plot that point on our graph, and then we'll use a table of x, y where it is on the graph, and then in reference at that point we'll kind of sketch the slope for those values. So here at 0, 1, we'll start right there since that's our first point. When I plug in 0 plus 1, that tells me that the y prime is 1, so that means the slope is 1 at that point. So I can draw kind of a line, which is a slope of 1. Let's plug in 1, 1. That gets me 2, 1, 2, gets me 3. So those are very steep points. And so as I get closer to those, I should be kind of sloping a little bit more vertically or heading up. If I go in between there, 1/2 comma 1 and 1/2, that's about 2. So on that right side, I should be heading kind of straight up to the right of 0, 1. Looking on the left, if I go the other way, negative 1/2, 1/2 is 0. And then as I continue to do that, negative 1, 1/2, and let's say 1 gets me negative 1/2 again. And as I keep going up there, so negative 2 and 1 and 1/2 for the y gives me negative 1/2 as well. If I go a little bit further over and plug in negative 1 and 1/2 and 1/2 for my y value, I get negative 1. So the slope starts to become more negative. Then negative 2, 1, that's also negative 1. And so from here, I can kind of tell that it kind of starts to teeter back that way as a negative slope, and then kind of becomes more steep as I continue through. So that's kind of what they're going to have you do. They're going to have you sketch a directional field for the entire graph, depending on what they're looking for. They usually won't tell you the whole array of what's going on, but from 2 to negative 2 and 2 to negative 2 is usually a pretty good parameter. Sometimes they'll do 3 to negative 3, 3 to negative 3. They don't usually get very much bigger than that, maybe 4. But after that, that's where they kind of peter off for their value. So here, if for our normal problem, they're going to ask you to kind of sketch 3 graphs. Now, if they just ask you to sketch 3 graphs, you get to pick the initial values that you're using. In some of the problems on your homework, they may tell you which ones to start with, kind of like I did for the first one, but it's all pretty much the same. So what I'm doing here is I'm plugging in my points to kind of see what I get, and I'm kind of sketching out what the slopes would be as I go through. So if you notice, when I plugged in 0, 2, because of what that is, the y value becomes half of what it was, so the slope is 1 at 2. And then as I move down, 0, 1, the slope was 1/2. At 0, 0 was 0. At 1, 1, it was still 1/2. So notice that because there's no x value, a part of your differential equation, it doesn't matter what the x is. So whatever the y is, it'll always be the same all the way across. So things above the x-axis will have a positive slope. Things below the negative or below the x-axis will have a negative slope. So here I just picked 3 values to plot. And so initial point would be 0, 1 here, kind of like what we started with. So it gave me kind of that slope heading towards the x-axis. If I picked a point on the opposite side, 0, negative 1, kind of did the same thing, a little bit of a reflection over the x-axis, but negative slopes. And then 0, 0, since it's on that line and the slope is always 0, it'll never get away. So it'll always be on the x-axis there. Okay, for letter B, let's try this one as well. This one has a little bit different kind of slope to it because you have an x and a y, plus you have the positive 1 added to it. And so I kind of picked just several points to kind of figure out what I'm doing. So every time you have the same x and y, they kind of cancel out. So then the slope is always 1. So that y equals x line becomes just a positive slope there. And then I test out some other points. So negative 1, comma 1. So I'm in the second quadrant there. And it looks like I get negative 1. So the slope changes a little bit. It goes from positive 1 to a negative 1. And so if I chose 1, comma negative 1, so I'm on the opposite side now, my slope becomes more positive, so steeper than the one that we had. So I get 3. And then I just keep picking in points. So negative 2, 2. So that sends me further up there. That gets me negative 3, so more steep. 0, 1. That's going to give me a 0. And really what I'm doing with this, I'm just looking for patterns. Kind of like I did on that first one. I noticed that pattern. Here, I'm going to do 1, 0. And I get a 2. So it looks like mainly on the right, or like the bottom right side, so of that line that I've already created, it looks like I'm mostly going to have positive slopes that kind of head towards that line. On the other side, it looks like it's kind of turning because I have 0 slope, or I found a pattern of 0 slope, so it looks like everything's a diagonal like sense. So then from there, I kind of picked it apart from there. So like negative 2, 0 will have a slope of negative 1 as well. So we'll 0, 2. And so then I kind of work my way up. So then negative 2, 1, that one will have a slope of, it looks like negative 2 as well. And so I'm kind of just picking them up. 0, negative 1, and 1, 0 both have slope of 2 there. So I found all the way up. And so everything was like kind of just worked out to be in a diagonal from left to right, bottom left to top right. You just kind of fill them in. So you don't have to make a table for every point that you have there, but you do want to kind of fill in as much as you can with the knowledge that you have. And once you start seeing patterns, you'll be able to see kind of what it's doing. So on the left side, so starting in that second quadrant, it kind of looks like it's sloping down, but then coming to a 0 and then coming back to be in line with our slopes of 1. On the other side of that, starting in the fourth quadrant, everything is very positively steeped, going up, but it starts to taper off as it gets closer to that 1. So it's like everything from left to right goes from being very negative to being 0 to being 1 and then very positive. So then from there I need to pick my values, so I picked the same kind of 3 points. So 0, 1 gave me kind of that picture. 0, negative 1 gave me a very similar picture, but a little bit different because it's on the other side, had different slopes to work with. So a little bit more straight. And then 0, 0, since it was on that line, it's going to be a straight line with a slope of 1. Okay? All right, have fun.